Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the IAIB Spotlight. I'm Andrew Zarian, and this week we have a very special guest. I've been listening to this guy on the radio, via podcast, his website for quite a few years. Since 1999, I've been listening to him as long as I can remember. One of the first internet broadcasts I listened to, actually. So it's actually a little bit of a treat for me to have Mr. Bryan Alvarez from Figure 4 Online / Wrestling Observer here with us. How you doing, Bryan?
I'm doing pretty good.
So we were talking off the air. I've been listening to the Wrestling Observer and everything you guys have been doing for quite some time now. You're in the podcasting world now, obviously, but you're on the radio. You do a radio show that's syndicated across the country. You're on XM. You're pretty much everywhere. But let's go to the beginning. When you started doing radio, how did you get into it?
I started doing radio actually through a 900 line, which wasn't really radio, but that was the first experience I had, like recording audio. Years ago, they had the 1-900 numbers, which I think most people probably when they think 900 numbers, they think of like the porn lines and everything like that. Yeah. But they had 900 numbers for all sorts of things, and one of those things was for wrestling.
I was going to say it was going to take a different turn if you said it was one of those kind of websites. That's how you got started in.
During the late 90s, sometimes we discussed, one step away from porn when talking about wrestling. But
yeah.
They had these 900 lines, and WWE had one, and WCW had one, and Dave had one. Dave Meltzer, who had the Observer, and I think Wade Keller had one as well. But I started a newsletter in 1995, and it grew fairly fast. I mean, it wasn't like a giant success. I still had another job, but there were a fair number of people reading it. And I saw that Dave had a podcast, and Wade of the Torch had a podcast, or not a podcast, a hotline. And I thought, okay, well, I'll give this hotline a try. I knew nothing about 900 lines.
So when you did the newsletter, though, how did that work? I mean, you was it a weekly thing? Was that a monthly newsletter you were putting out?
I have put out a newsletter every single week since June 12, 1995.
Wow.
I've not skipped a week in that time. And it was every single week, and it was a lot longer back then than it is today, but it was a lot of work. And back then, we started in 95, so the internet, you had you had BBS systems and that sort of thing, and very primitive. You had a lot of primitive. There was I think it was a Prodigy wrestling board or something like that. It was a long time ago. But in order to get information out quickly, people had these 900 lines. So I started one for my newsletter. And what it was for 99 cents a minute, and I think I later bumped it to $1.99 a minute because it wasn't doing well. For 99 cents a minute, I would record a message 3 times a week, and people could call in and listen to the message and pay 99 cents a minute. And it was kind of like pay-per-view in the sense that I would get 40%, I think, and the phone company would get 60%. It was kind of this split. But the key to the whole thing was I would record these messages. I would hope people would call and listen. But because of what was happening with the porn 900 lines, where these little kids would call in and then their parents would get the bill and they would go, "We're not paying for this bill." There was a law where if you got your bill and you decided you didn't want to pay, you didn't have to.
Oh my God.
But if you refused to pay, I had to pay back all the money. But I only got 4%, but I had to pay back 100%. So long story short, we had a guy who decided he was going to call every single day, and his parents didn't like it, and so they didn't want to pay. And so I owed the 900 line 100% of the money. And I got hit with a bill for, I swear, it was about a $4,000 bill.
Oh my
for
God.
Oh my God. I could not afford $4,000. So that was the end of the 900 line. Whole thing got shut down. So as soon as it got shut down, I sent a fax to Dave. And I said, I had this 900 line. It didn't work out. I know you've got a line with a bunch of different options. Can I be on option 3? Because somebody was leaving the hotline. So he just called back and he said, sure, you can take option 3. And so I started doing the updates for Dave's 900 line. And fast forward to, 98 and 99 when IATA started, he wanted somebody who in the first 20 minutes of the show that we would discuss news, and he called me and he said, "You want to do this?" And I had nothing going on. So I was like, sure. And so I did the first 20 minutes on IATA.com for I don't know, 6-8 months. And then he said, hey, it seems to be working out well. Why don't you do the whole show? And so I started doing the whole show. And the next thing you know, I was a co-host on a internet radio show. And the rest is history.
I mean, it's amazing to me because one thing that I've always been fascinated with what you and Dave have been able to do with a podcast, where most people can't figure out how to do, and that's to make money off of it. And your podcast, I believe you do one show a week that's a free model, but everything else is a subscription-based model where people pay monthly to obviously get more information other than a podcast. They're paying for the entire website, but that's how they consume the podcast. So you started in pretty much with a paid model, subscription model from the beginning.
Well, what really happened was, so we had IATA, and then when IATA died, we went to the Sports Byline USA.
Which is still with them, right?
Yes. Okay. And I was on Sports Byline USA for 4 years before we started the website. So when we started the website, all it was my newsletter was doing all right, but it was not making a lot of money. And I was turning 30, and I was like, you need to do something. You're 30 now, This is no more 19-year-old having a newsletter for fun. You're 30 years old. You got to do something with your life.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's just so expensive, the postage and the printing. And so I brought it up to my brother-in-law who did he worked on internet stuff, and he said, why don't you just my idea was I'll have the newsletter available via email. So you can subscribe, you can get a discount, I'll save money on postage and printing, and I'll email the newsletter to you every week. So I'm trying to talk to him about what's the best way to do this. Spam filters are not letting people get the emails, blah, blah, blah. And he just goes, why don't you just do a website? He goes, just do a website. He was a big porn fan, which is, I think, where this idea came from. Yeah. He goes, why don't you just have internet, a website, people sign up, and if you're a subscriber, the newsletter just goes on the website every week. And I was like, man, you know what you're doing.
Did Dave have a website at this time?
No.
Okay.
No. We tried a website together in like 2000, 2001, and it was a massive failure. And so Dave was terrified of the idea of going online. I thought there was a possibility if we did it right that it could be successful. So Tony makes this website, and once the website is going, one day it was just kind of like, what if we did like audio updates? Kind of like the old hotlines, except you subscribe to the website and you'll get an audio update from us. It was just something wacky. It was like me and Vinny actually got a little voice recorder, and we just like talked into it for 10 minutes, and then we put it online. And the first time we did it, people were like, hey, that's awesome. And so we started doing it a little more regularly, and then we had it up on iTunes pretty quick. And once it was on iTunes, we would do a free show once a week, and then the rest of the little audio shows would be subscription only. And that's how like the majority of our subscribers were people that heard about it on iTunes. They wanted to hear it more, and so they signed up. And that's really like, nowadays a lot of people sign up for the Observer, and we did the merger. A lot of people came over for Dave. But before the merger, by June of 2008, we had a really, really successful site based almost exclusively on what became what we call the radio shows, the podcasts. And I just, once it started going, it was like, I got to make these sound good. I got to get the right equipment. But that's how it started.
I want to kind of take a step back to the IATA days. What was that like for you? I mean, this is the early days of internet broadcasting, and it was live, obviously. I believe you guys were on almost every day in the afternoons, right?
I think it was 3 to 5 Monday to Friday.
It's crazy because I always talk about, when people ask me, what is the first, internet broadcast you heard? And I've done a ton of interviews, and I've always said, I'm like, oh, there's this show called The Wrestling Observer I used to listen to after school in the afternoons. Was that difficult to do? Was the technology still not there? I mean, now you're talking years later. What was it like comparatively to you going online now and doing your show?
Well, at the time when I first started, they built a studio for Dave in his house because the studios were in New York and he was in San Jose. And I think the studio consisted of, he had they called it a vector, It's a I forget what the actual technical term is because I haven't used one since 1998. But basically, it plugs into your phone line, and it's kind of like I guess it's sort of like a modem. But God, what is the name they use? Anyway, the point is, he had a studio in his house.
Are you talking about a zip line, like an ISDN?
No, it was through the phone. In fact, hold on. I'll tell you right now, because I've got the BSW USA cheap plug catalog.
That's funny.
They actually have them in here. It is like all sorts of different places make them, but it's a remote unit which you can plug into your telephone line at your house, and you can get not broadcast quality, but pretty close to broadcast quality. I mean, Skype now you get the same sort of quality, but back then, I'll just say it was similar to Skype. I'll find a thing later.
Okay.
But the point is, he had a studio, but for me, I did it over the telephone. So at 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock p.m., I picked up the phone, and Dave calls, and I just talked into the phone. And I did it for free for at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And I wanted to step it up, but, Dave was the main guy. I was the co-host, so he got all the stuff, and I was on the phone. So finally, I was just like, this was probably 2000, probably 2000. Yeah, I think it was mid-2000. I was like, all right, I want the studio thing. I want the home studio, and I want money for this. And I don't even know what compelled me or how I got it set up, but they agreed to pay me $200 a week, which at the time I was like, wow.
I mean, that's great money. A lot of people in radio right now are not getting that.
That's at the time and believe me, Dave was getting a lot more. I don't know what Dave was making, but it was a lot more than $200 a week.
Yeah.
But I got the $200 a week, and I thought it was rich. And they sent me a Zephyr, whatever it's called. Zephyr. That's I think that's the term they use nowadays. So I started doing it over the Zephyr live, and I was like, man, sounds like I'm on the radio. This is great. I was big time. And I went out and I moved out of my parents' house as soon as I got that first $200 check that I knew I was getting that week. Went and bought an apartment, and I swear to you, the moment I moved into the apartment, IATA closed down or check.
I believe you guys closed it out, right? You guys were the last broadcast on
there.
there.
The last show. Yeah. Pulled the plug on IATA.com.
I always say that company started 5 years too early, in my opinion. It had such potential, and there was such a big... I mean, Time Warner was back in that thing, and there was so many other companies. And I bring up IATA to people. They're like, I don't know what that is. I'm like, oh my God, it was unbelievable. Like, they were doing video at a certain point, and that was unheard of in 99, 2000. Think about that.
Well, let me say one thing about IATA. When we were doing the show, we had critics that said, they always claim all of these listeners, but there's really not that many people listening. And they try to do breakdowns to claim that it's really only about, I forget what they said, they got 125 listeners or this and that. And I never saw real numbers, but I know that today, in your today's example, I hear from people all the time that listen to IATA. There were so many people that listened to our show on IATA. And I think the issue was that it was a little bit before its time. But the other issue was, I think that they had a studio in Times Square, the main IATA deal in Times Square. It was like a $20 million studio.
Oh, yeah, it was stunning. It was stunning.
Yeah. They had this ridiculously expensive studio. They used to put these ads in like Entertainment Weekly. And the ads, I mean... you would have absolutely no idea what IATA was. I mean, I can't remember the ads, but it would be like a picture of a prairie. And then at the top would just say IATA.com. Nothing about radio, nothing about anything. They were just these weird, and these ads were like ridiculously expensive. And we would just look at these ads, Dave and I, and just think, why don't they just like give us the money they spent on that ad? And everything would be great. We'd be happier, and they wouldn't be losing their money with this ad here on entertainment. It was just they wasted a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, I've heard the same story from many people that work there, and they say it was almost like they were playing with someone else's money, which they were.
Yeah.
So they didn't really care.
If they would have had a budget 10% of what they had, they still would have had a great product, and it would probably still be alive in some form today.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. So when you when obviously IATA went under and you guys teamed up with Sports Byline, and they syndicate the show all over the place. How was that for you? Did you see a spike? Did you not notice it? And over the last couple of years of being on terrestrial radio, do you feel that it has a more of an influence on your brand and how you're? I guess what I'm trying to say is, are you seeing a result from that as much as you see online, or is it kind of the same?
It is really hard to say. Sometimes I do that show and I think there's nobody in the world listening, but I can go online and I put the replay up right after the show and it gets a lot of downloads every single week. And I don't even know, if you go to Sports Byline USA, there's like a list of affiliates like this long, but I know they've got some affiliates in this state and I've never heard it on any of those affiliates. So I don't know what their real affiliate list is. I don't really know where we're playing terrestrially. I know that on Sirius Satellite Radio, we air very frequently during the spring and summer. And once football season starts, we get preempted quite a bit, at least on 92 and 94. Someone told me I don't have 794, but someone said it's on 794 every single week. So I know there are people listening, and I get emails from people that listen to the show and then sign up. So it does happen, but I don't really have... I mean, they don't give me any numbers. I don't hear anything from... I mean, I have no idea how many people listen to the show. But I do know that with TuneIn Radio and iHeartRadio, our website, and Sirius and Sports Byline, I mean, it is listened to a lot. But it's I never get any real concrete number, so I don't know.
That's fascinating to me. That it's interesting. I always find it interesting when you have somebody that's both on the radio. I mean, it's the trifecta, really. You're on XM, you're on the radio, and you put it out on podcast. One of my closest friends, he went from terrestrial radio to XM, and he says that the first thing he noticed was that the callers changed. Instead of getting some guy in his house, he was getting truckers all day.
Oh, yeah.
That's who their demo is, really, because they're traveling across state lines and they don't want to find a radio station. So he said that was the most fascinating thing. But I guess with professional wrestling, it's so niche where people will find you.
Yes. To me, at least, all I know is based on who contacts me. And the vast majority of the people that contact me are people that listen to it. They download the shows and they listen to it on whatever. I hear far less from people who listen to it on Sirius, and I hear far less from people that listen to it on Sports Byline. I do hear from them, but the feedback I get is largely from subscribers and people that listen to it online. So I don't know what that means. I have no idea. It could be that I request feedback much, much, much more on our paid podcast. The terrestrial radio show, it's 2 hours of recapping the news and maybe previewing a pay-per-view, and that's it. It's a very general audience type of show. And you can kind of tune it in, listen to it, have fun, and then tune in the next week. The actual podcast we do on the site, that's where we say, if you've got a question, mailbag at WrestlingObserver.com. If you want to call in, here are the numbers. Here's the Skype number. Here's a toll-free number. Here's all this. So I get more give and take on the podcasts, on the actual WrestlingObserver.com shows than I do on the terrestrial and satellite radio. Is
it difficult for you and Dave to kind of, with the radio show and with the podcast too, your numbers kind of determine where the wrestling industry is at the moment? How do you kind of make up for that in a way?
Our subscribers?
Not, I don't know if it just traffic in general, right? With popularity in general. I mean, there's obviously peaks and valleys with professional wrestling. Do you kind of compensate when it's a bad, time for professional wrestling? How do you kind of counteract that?
Well, to me, I really try very hard to produce a really quality podcast. I don't always succeed. If you've listened to our shows, we strike out sometimes, but I try to make every podcast as best I can a fun podcast and an entertaining podcast. I want the podcast to be something where It is something that people look forward to every day. Even though it's not live, I do the taped shows at the same time every day, so that if you're in the habit of waking up on Tuesday morning and getting your Wrestling Observer Radio for the way to work, it's always going to be there. I try really hard to not get off the schedule, because what I want is I want to provide a product that is about wrestling that people love and it becomes a part of their lives. And that way, if wrestling goes like this or like this or like this,
it doesn't
mostly
really
if it goes
matter.
like this. If it goes down, we still have something that people want to listen to. It's not dependent on whether wrestling is doing well or not. And the other day, my brother-in-law is in charge of payouts, and we usually do payouts on the 20th of every month. And he was at a wedding in September, and so he did payouts 4 days late, and that meant this month he did payouts 4 days early. So the point of my story is, when I send the checks to Dave, because of the discrepancy in what day he did the payouts, Dave went from having a paycheck that was like this big to one that was like this big. And so he was, oh my God.
Oh no, it's the end. Yeah.
They're dropping off the face of the earth. What happened? And so I went online because I wanted to see, all right, where are our subscribers today as compared to last year at this exact same time? And the number, I swear to you, was exactly the same. It was a 4-person difference.
I'm probably one of those.
And this was at 6 o'clock at night. So we were 4 less this year than last year. But I think that by the end of the night, 4 people probably would have renewed or signed up. So it was literally identical year to year. So the point of this is, I think that we've kind of got a product that people, whether wrestling is doing great or whether wrestling is not doing great, we stay pretty consistent because people are signing up more for the product, something they like to listen to every day, people that they consider their friends. It's more about that. It's not so dependent on the wrestling business.
And that's amazing. I find that amazing that it's really, because I'm one of these people. I mean, I've watched wrestling since I was a kid, but I go in and out. There are times that I watch it more than other times, but I consistently still download your show.
Yeah. I hear from people all the time that are just like you. They go, I quit watching wrestling in 2000 whatever, but I still listen to the shows. So great.
Yeah.
Makes me very, very happy.
Something I want to ask you about, and I've always noticed that this has happened with when a show gets popular, especially you guys, because Dave Meltzer and you are 2 names that people know as far as wrestling news, and you have a popular show, obviously, and considering it's a paid model, you only have one show that's free. You have your free show, but how do you battle piracy? Because if you know wrestling and you're looking for stuff, Wrestling Observer stuff at times, I mean, not current, but at times you could find stuff that may not be the free show all over the place. How do you battle that? Because I would imagine that's a very difficult thing to do.
Well, we have a couple of people. If the shows show up like on a message board somewhere, we have a couple of guys that they'll go to work and they'll try and get it taken down. Now, obviously, there are some places where the shows show up and there's just nothing that can be done.
Yeah.
You ask them to take it down, they're not going to take it down. There's nobody you can contact. There's just there's nothing you can do. Like
YouTube, for example, right? Like if you pull up a clip on YouTube,
can be taken down.
YouTube
can be taken down. Yeah.
Okay.
But there are sites, that they're based internationally or whatever, and there's just nothing you can do. There's just nothing you can do to take them down. And there's something we can do. So I don't stress about what I have no control over. And we have subscribers. Usually it's a subscriber that contacts me and they go, I go to this board and these people are putting your shows up and it makes me mad because I'm paying for it and I want to support you guys. And so the thing I've always thought is I am going to do what I can to give you the best value for your money. And what I want to do is I want to create a product where you want to support the product. And even though you may be able to find the product for free somewhere, you appreciate the hard work that goes into it, and so you support it. And as long as we have enough people that are willing to do that, then we're going to stay in business. You know, if the day comes where every single person decides, I can get this for free, I refuse to pay anymore, then the product will be gone. And you know, if it gets to that point, then I can just kind of say to myself, you didn't provide a very good product if it was a product that nobody felt like they should pay to support it. And if you go to well, I don't know where you can go, but there are places that work strictly on a donation basis.
Yeah.
And we don't do that. But in a sense, when you have a product that people could, if they worked for it, find somewhere else for free, I mean, it is sort of on a donation basis with those people. You know what I mean? They could get it for free, but they appreciate what you do. And so essentially they're donating their subscription price every month to continue to get it from you. And the other thing is, if you sign up, yeah, you can get some stuff elsewhere. But our subscription package, you've got new observers, old observers, figure fours, archives, the new shows, shows dating back to 2005, the board. You know, there's a billion different things that you can get on there. And maybe you could go a million different places to try to piece it together for free. But it's only $10.99, and it's a lot easier to just pay $10.99 and go and get whatever you want whenever you want.
You know, I come from everything that I do at the GF Key Network. It's a free model. I just give it all away. So for me, I always find it so fascinating when someone is doing a paid model, a subscription model, and it works. And on the we have a forum, and we got a message, and this is actually why I contacted you. We got a message from a guy. He has a pretty successful podcast, and he wants to go to a premium model, and he was actually worried. He goes, if one guy or two guys take the podcast and they put it out everywhere, I mean, now the show is totally free, and most of my audience is going to get it. But you're saying, no, you can't worry about those guys. You got to just keep doing it. If they were going to support you, they're going to support you. If they were not going to support you, they were never going to support you.
Well, I did a poll a long time ago, a couple of years ago, about pay-per-view piracy. Because, you know, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want a UFC show, I'm sure you can find a place to stream it. I did a poll, and I asked everybody on our website, just like a bunch of questions. Do you stream? What do you stream? Why do you stream? If you stream, would you ever buy? And I got a lot of responses, like hundreds of responses. And what it came down to was, if we feel that there is value in the pay-per-view, we will pay for it. We mostly stream when it's too expensive, or we feel that the card is not worth the money, or we're going to watch it alone. A lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what they basically said was, tons of people stream TNA because they usually didn't feel that it was worth the money. The $34. They could never get anybody to come over to their house to watch the show, so there was nobody to split it with, and that's what they said. But you know, if they said, if it's a great show, I'd be willing to pay for it. And the same thing with WWE. Like we didn't get most people bought WrestleMania, which is the most expensive show of the year.
It's almost $80, right?
65.
Okay.
A lot of people streamed like Night of Champions, because it was a random show. It was a whatever card. Nobody was coming over to watch it. They'd have to put out all the money on their own, so they streamed that one. UFC, a larger number of people bought the show because they had friends coming over to their house. They were excited for the main event. They thought it was a good card. They wanted to see it easily on the big screen. You know, there's a lot of stuff you can plug and everything like that, but it's easy to just push the buttons on the big screen. So what I concluded was, if you produce a product that people find value in, it's not too expensive. You got to find the right price point, and you've got to provide people with a product that they like you, they like the product, they want to support you, they want to keep the thing going. They'll pay for it. I guarantee you, they will pay for it.
I also think that if, like, someone like you, which with your website, you have a community around your website. You have the boards, which is your forum. You know, there are people that are active that kind of become your marketing and kind of become this support group for each other. So there's more of an incentive to stay in it. I think that's a big selling point for someone like you that has a paid model. Even us. I mean, we have a community around our show, and it's a major help because, you know what, they're our marketing team. I want to ask you about portion of, you know, the news side of the news portion of the website. when websites pick up, Dave Meltzer and Bryan Alvarez on the Wrestling Observer said, and then they quote it or they'll repost the stuff from your website. Is that a negative for you, or is that almost like, well, it's going to happen and it's marketing because now people are seeing my name and seeing the Wrestling Observer and Figure 4 online website everywhere?
I don't know, because they've been doing that since before we had a website.
But does it bother you in any way?
It doesn't bother me.
Okay.
I mean, it's some people get really bothered when they break a story and then someone else, says, this is what WrestlingObserver.com reported about The Rock. Some people get really upset about that. And to me, it's like, it's news. How do you, let's say that there's an earthquake in Bothell and the Seattle Times reports big earthquake, buildings toppled. Are you telling me that the New York Times can't carry that story because they didn't break it? They've just got to not mention it? Of course they're going to mention it. It's just like, to me, once the news is out, the news is out. And that's why, in terms of wrestling and mixed martial arts, we would not survive on just breaking news. We wouldn't.
Yeah. Because
it would be all over the place. That's why you've got to have a big, a community package, just like you said. We don't just talk the news. The podcasts we've got to discuss the news. We've got to engage the listeners. We've got to answer their questions or take their calls. We've got to have some fun. The Thursday Bryan and Vinny show. We talk about Impact for about 20 minutes. And the rest of the time, we talk to my grandmother. What about? She goes to bingo. She goes to Wendy's and gets a burger for 99 cents. She's just talking about her life. And I honest to God, I get more emails about Granny than anything else, because all of the wives and the girlfriends, they all will listen to the Thursday show with their significant other who subscribes.
That's great.
And people love the fact that my wife listens to the show with me because of Granny. So, some people are like, oh my God, why has this guy got his grandmother on the show? It's just, it's one day a week and it's something different.
Absolutely.
That it's a way to engage people and get people listening with somebody else and it's just something fun, because we can't survive on just breaking news. It won't work.
Now, you also, you do obviously wrestling and mixed martial arts, but you've kind of expanded outside of that. You and I have very much things we have art in common. Absolutely. I'm a huge art fan. And I had no idea you did that. And, I think literally 2 weeks ago, I discovered that you do the show. And I turned on, I'm like, oh my God, this is great. They're talking about Bigfoot. It's amazing.
Yes.
How has that crossed over with the wrestling viewership? I mean, obviously you do because you have a passion for this and you like that kind of stuff. But how has the audience responded to you doing a show about, aliens and time travelers and Bigfoot?
Well, to me, when I first started the Figure 4, before I started Figure 4, little known fact, I considered a newsletter about After Dark related material.
I think that's brilliant.
That was the first newsletter I thought about. And I ended up going with wrestling. Thank God, because I think in the end of the day, it probably was a longer career.
There's a lot of common ground. Yeah.
There's not much. He hasn't been found yet. I mean, I don't know if I could build a career on not finding Bigfoot. But I was always a huge fan of Art Bell. Gigantic fan. I mean, I am right here in this chair talking to you right now because of Art Bell. And I started listening to Art, and he was interested in all the things that I was interested in. And he had this show all the time, and I was like, this is the best show ever. I love this show. And so, obviously, when he went off the air for 10 years, it was like, oh my God, this is it's just the worst.
Were you a Nori fan? Did you listen to Nori?
Not a Nori fan.
Okay.
Not a Nori fan. He's just not really a fan of Nori. Art, you just can't go from Art to anybody else, in my opinion, when talking about this stuff. He's just he approaches it exactly like I do. I'll listen to any story. I'll listen to any theory. But I'm skeptical about everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so is he. He'll take these calls and he'll humor people, and there's obviously stuff that he believes in more than others, but he gives everybody a forum. But he's not like just, okay, yeah, whatever. They're, aliens are here. They're infiltrating. He doesn't necessarily believe in all of that, but he'll give everybody a forum. So anyway, the point is, I always wanted to do a show like that. But, I was busy doing everything else. So one day I decided, this was about 2 years ago, I'm going to just, as an experiment, do a show like this. And my buddy Carl Stern, he was going to co-host with me. And we did the first show, and the key is I didn't replace a wrestling show with After Dark. I added After Dark. So if anybody wanted to complain, it was just like, well, I'm not going to listen to your complaint. It's a added bonus show. You don't have to listen to it, and it's not replacing anything. So we added the show, and like gigantic. I mean, the feedback I got for that show was ridiculous. And to me, it was like wrestling fans and people that are interested in Bigfoot, UFO, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're the same sort of person. You're interested in something that your average person on the street is going to look at you like maybe you're just kind of a little bit crazy. You know what I mean? You believe in Bigfoot is the same as you watch wrestling. So I found that like the crossover was a huge crossover. And so I still do it to this day. It's not like, we do it Friday nights. I don't do it every Friday nights. I do it when I can. I can't devote 100% to it. So it's what it is. I love doing it, and people love listening to it. It's not ever going to be Art's show, and he's on Sirius. So I even told people, it's like, there's no use me doing the show anymore. Art's back. But people said, please keep doing the show. So I keep doing the show.
I think it's a great show. I really enjoyed it. And it's almost almost like this relief where, I'm into the wrestling stuff and I'm listening to the podcast, and to hear someone that does, the wrestling stuff specifically do something else, I think it's fascinating, and I really enjoy listening to it. I like that. I like the little change. Like it's almost like, wow, he's talking about that. I'm kind of interested in that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love doing the show. I mean, I wish I could devote more time and attention to it, but I can't. So I just got to do the best I can. And, I'm sure George Norrie is a nice guy, but as long as I can do a little bit better than George Norrie, I'm cool.
You're happy with it.
I'm happy with that.
Let's talk about the technical stuff that you have. How are you putting the show together? What kind of equipment are you using?
I have, as you're well aware, since the Skype thing was quite the ordeal getting it figured out.
But you're doing it now.
I've got all hardware when I do the show. I've got a Yamaha N8 mixer. I've got a Telos NX6, which takes the calls. I've got a Telos call. I forget what they call it, but it manages the calls and everything like that.
Yeah.
Hi-L PR40 mic, and then just the computer just records it. The only post-production I do is a noise gate, and that's it. I don't do any other effects, nothing. So I was a huge fan of Art Bell, and so when we first started doing the audio updates, I was never happy because I didn't like the quality. I was like, this doesn't sound like Art's show. And so it was like, okay, well, I'll get a better mic. Still doesn't sound like Art's show. Okay, well, I'll get a mixer. Still doesn't sound like it. It never sounded like it did on the radio. So eventually it was just like, I am going to pay the money, and I am going to install a full, like virtually a studio that you would use on the radio in my house. All hardware. Everything is from like Broadcast Supply, And
by the way, Telos, they make everything in my equipment, everything in my studio is from the Telos, and it's all Axie equipment, and they're actually amazing. They're very good friends of ours. They make some unbelievable stuff, but in radio, it's actually different for someone in podcasting because you're doing the whole, you're using an NX1 and you're doing the phone calls and you're doing everything like that, where a lot of people kind of piece everything together in podcasting.
Yeah, I just didn't want to mess around with it. To me, it sounded the best, so I just bought all the hardware. And the hardest thing for me, and it's still a struggle, is for example, when I went on my honeymoon, I am not here, and so I had to come up with a mobile rig that I could transport to Hawaii or wherever that sounded almost. I wanted to sound exactly as good as here in the studio, and I've never been able to perfectly match it. but I've gotten really, 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 really close, and that's been my biggest struggle. I hate bad audio, and I've worked really, really, really hard to make it sound good, because to me that's part of the, that's part of the selling point for the show. I mean, there's 8 million wrestling podcasts. So at the very least, I want to make mine sound the best if you're paying for it.
There's 8 million of them, but I guarantee you 7.8 of those or 7.9 of those sound absolutely awful.
It's not easy. It's not easy to make them sound good.
Now that because of me berating you about Skype, you're now incorporating it in your setup. How is that transition working out for you? I know you've tried a couple shows where they're calling with Skype, and we were discussing microphones. Are you planning on sending microphones to everybody that does a show with you and just using Skype?
Well, that's a good question. I started using Skype after you encouraged me to set it up. I've got a Mac now, and for some reason I don't even know what I was doing. Like I've changed so many things over the years that I can't even remember what I used to be doing. But there was a period where I had a PC, and I had a certain audio settings on my computer. And whenever I put Skype on the computer, it just destroyed all of these other audio settings. And it was a disaster. So I was like, I'm never using Skype. I'm never putting Skype on the computer. So, and I hadn't even tried since I got the Mac. And for whatever reason, I've tried to simplify everything in my life. And I guess I've got everything so simplified on my Mac that I put the Skype on, and it made absolutely no difference to everything else.
That's perfect.
So once I did that, it was like, maybe I can take Skype calls. And I experimented last week, and it works out great. So
it sounds amazing. I mean, the callers sounded amazing.
Yeah. So now for call-in shows, we've got a landline, we've got an 800 line, and we've got the Skype line. And we're gonna, in fact, in a half hour, we've got a show on Mid-South Wrestling, and we're gonna take calls on all three, and hopefully it sounds great. But yeah, Skype is the thing with Skype is, especially for Dave. Dave is he's not on the cutting edge of technology, and I think that he would admit that as well. So he only has Skype on his laptop, and he's got a very, very it appears he's got a cheap headset. All I know is I tried to do a test, and he actually sounded better on the NX6 on landline than he did on the headset.
Wow.
So I mean, I suppose I could try and get him to put Skype on his main computer that's actually hooked up to his internet, and maybe get him some stuff. But it kind of depends on. It just really depends on each individual person's audio setup and whether they sound better on the phone or on Skype. I tried Lance yesterday, Lance Storm, and he put the headset thing he's got on and sounded better on the landline. So it'll just depend. Like Mike Sempervive for Wrestling Observer Live, he sounds much better on Skype. He's got a good mic. He's got a good little studio setup. He's got good internet. So for him, I'm using Skype. And then for other people, it's just at this point, what sounds better?
Brian, if I were to suggest one thing, it's this microphone right here. The ATR 2100. ATR 2100 is $35.
Yeah,
$35. It is one of the best microphones I have heard for podcasting. It's very inexpensive. I have this one right here is the pro level one, which all it is, it's a different pop filter on this thing. And I have a $1,000 microphone in front of me, and I have this $50 mic in front of me. When I talk into it, people can't tell the difference.
Let me ask you one quick question here.
Sure.
What do you think of the Yeti USB mic?
I hate them.
You hate them?
I do. I don't like it.
Because I had an extra one in my house, and Vinny needs a mic for when he's not in the studio, and I just gave him the Yeti. So if you think the Yeti sucks, I'll invest in something else.
I don't think the Yeti sucks. The problem with them, if there's dynamic microphones and condenser microphones. The condenser mics pick up, like right now you're on a Heil PR40, that's a dynamic mic. This is a condenser mic, but I'm doing so much processing on this thing where it's canceling out all the noise. If it's not the greatest environment, it's going to pick up everything around them. But if they are calling into a POTS line, you're going to see a tremendous difference regardless. So yeah, if you have it, definitely use it.
Okay.
But I'm a big fan of this ATR.
Much better. Okay. I'll look into that.
And by the way, they don't endorse me. They don't pay me. I don't make a dime from them. I'm just a huge fan of that microphone.
All right, cool.
So let me ask you, we have a couple minutes. I want to talk to you about the future of the radio show and the podcast and everything you're doing, will we see a video version of the Wrestling Observer ever?
We'll see.
I would love a video version of it.
We'll talk. I've always just kind of been like, why would anyone want to watch me talking into a mic? And that's no offense to you. You know what I mean? I'm just saying,
listen, like, I have the same mentality. I mean, we do the video thing, and I always say, like, why would you watch me do the show? But it's a big selling point. People love it.
Yeah, it's. I'll just say it's possible. What I've always thought, and I guess it doesn't really matter whether you do it audio or video, is that I personally do at least 2 shows a day, and we're talking, I probably do 10 to 12 shows myself every single week. And a lot of people, I mean, their ritual is it gets downloaded to their iTunes, they jump in the car, and they've got 2 shows to listen to on the way to work and on the way home. And for those people, it doesn't matter if it's a video podcast. You know, the people that I hear that listen to the show, they're usually listening to it while they work, while they exercise, while they're in traffic, while they're at the gym. It's usually something where they're moving around, they're doing something, but they've got the audio in their ears. And so for those people, it doesn't matter if it's a video podcast. It's not like we got a once a week show on Sunday nights. We go live. You can watch it. You can kind of sit and just do whatever. To me, our audience, like all of the feedback I get, it's always like, yeah, I nearly dropped the weights on my foot because of something Granny said. You know, it saves my life in traffic. It's always stuff like that where they're just doing something else, and my voice and Dave's voice and everybody's voice is in their head. Yeah. So because of that, I've always been like, I don't really see the need to go video. But you know, if people are clamoring for video, like every now and then people will ask, can we have a Bryan and Vinny Christmas show, a video show? And it's like, okay, maybe one of these years, just for something different, we'll do the Christmas show on video. But in general, it's kind of like, audio's fine for the shows. Are
there any changes you want to make to any more shows that you're planning on adding? Or, I mean, you're doing one every day at this point, so it's a lot.
I don't have any shows I'd like to add. My dream... I still love the idea of being able to do live radio that is broadcast like all over the world. Like it's still back to Art's show. He's live on Sirius 4 hours every night, and the phone lines just ring. You pick them up. God knows who it is, which is how we do it. I don't have a screener here. It's just like the same thing. Just click the button and hope for the best. You know, those are my favorite shows. I just love when it's just like, here we go. What's going to happen? There's no editing. There's no nothing. Let's just go. I love that. And maybe someday we'll do it. But, you know, when I look at the success of the site and I look at how much people are making doing live radio for the most part, it's like, I can't afford to do that, quite frankly. So for now, it is how it is. And maybe someday we'll do more live stuff, or maybe someday we'll kind of expand in certain directions. But, you know, right now it's just like make everything we do better. Just try and make everything we do better.
Before we wrap up, Bryan, I ask this every now and then to one of the guests that we have on the show, or any guests we have on the show. You've been doing this for 15 years or so, you know, give or take. What is your favorite interview that you've done?
Oh, man.
Out of all of them.
Bruno Sammartino is always awesome. We had a Paul Heyman show that people always bring up that's awesome, and Conan is awesome. Just got a lot of... I don't think there's one show that I love, but the 2 things that I enjoy the most in general in shows is when we have a guest that is maybe not a big star. Maybe he's like a mid-level Ring of Honor guy, or he's somebody that nobody really thinks a lot about. And I go an hour with the guy, and when it's over, I get people emailing going, I wasn't going to listen to the show because I don't really know anything about so-and-so, but I decided to give it a shot. And man, that show was great. What a great interview. He seemed like such a great guy. I love shows like that because, you know, in traditional radio, the WWE will give guys access to the big names like, oh man, John Cena is going to be on the morning show. Dolph Ziggler is going to be on this show. But if you listen to the shows, it's like, it's always the same interview. Yeah. They have have certain talking points, and they've got to say the same stuff. You can't ask them anything else. And it's like, I'd rather interview a guy nobody's ever heard of and do a great interview and have people love the interview and go, man, this guy's really cool. I'm a big fan of this guy now. I'd so much rather do that than interview like a big name who's going to give me the same interview that he's gave everybody else. So some of my favorite shows are shows from guys that you've probably never heard of before, or a lot of people listening to this absolutely would have never heard of if they're not a wrestling fan. Those are my favorite shows.
Perfectly said. Bryan Alvarez, everybody, Wrestling Observer /Figure 4 online website. You could go to, let me get the domain here, f4wonline.com or Wrestling Observer online, wrestlingobserver.com. You could check out, he has the news there, he has audio, he has video, plus he does the free show. So there are shows out there. If you're not a subscriber, tune in. I'm telling you, if you're a professional wrestling fan or an MMA fan, this is, in my humble opinion, the best wrestling podcast out there. You're not getting over the top characters with an agenda when they're talking. They're actually discussing it like normal people. You know what? That's the hook for your show, Bryan. Discussing wrestling like normal people.
Like not crazy people? Is that it?
Yeah, not like crazy people that are screaming about
Sure.
John Cena being awful.
Well, at the end of the day, it's supposed to be fun. That's always my thing. Like I try. Sometimes shows are not fun, but I really try to just make every show fun. It's got to be entertaining and it's got to be fun. And I do want to say that I was so excited to do this show today. I was so excited to do this show because I've watched actually several of your podcasts, and I think they're. I don't know if you call them podcasts. I don't know what you'd call them.
Sure, they're podcasts. I call them that.
Yeah, I think you do an excellent job, and some of the shows I've gotten some good tips, and I was very, very excited. You could ask my wife. I was so excited to do the show today. So I really want to thank you for having me on.
Well, I'm excited that you were excited, and I had a great time, and I'd love to have you in again to talk about this stuff because I've always been fascinated with someone that has transitioned to the internet from regular radio and how it's going for them. And you're doing something really different over there because you have a pay model and a lot of people don't do it, and it's quite successful. So I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, anytime you want to have me on, now that I figured out Skype.
Now that you got it.
I didn't have to call via telephone.
I'm glad. I don't think the quality would have been as good.
No.
Guys, if you miss any portion of the show, of course, you could check it up on our website, gfknetwork.com. You could go to the IAIB, ibroadcastnetwork.org. If you're a podcaster, internet broadcaster, or you're doing anything on YouTube and you need some advice with audio, video, marketing of your show, we have a phenomenal message board over there. People are going on there. A lot of experts on that site just giving away the information. This is a big community, guys. We're all looking to help each other. Until next time, guys, we'll see you all next week. Good night, everybody.